Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I want to give a special thanks to Senator Dush for being here, Representative Keefer as well, and Mike Berry joining us as Executive Director of Litigation for the America First Policy Institute. So we thank you for all being here. My name is Hogan Gidley. I am the Vice Chair of the Center for Election Integrity at the America First Policy Institute. And our goal at the Center for Election Integrity is very simple. It's making it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Sadly, people on the political right and the political left have been complaining about the outcomes of elections for decades. This is nothing new. 65% of Republicans think Trump actually won in 2020. But if you go back to 2016, 60% of Democrats believe Hillary actually won. There have been irregularities, illegalities, anomalies, and fraud rife in our elections for quite some time. In fact, here in Pennsylvania, the Federalist did an expose in Delaware County where you had a whistleblower with hidden video showing horrible chain of custody for V drives just in a sack on top of a hood of a car. You saw election officials who appeared to be tearing up poll tapes, also talking about destroying machines, clearly a felony. We've seen convictions in the state of Pennsylvania for a whole host of election-related crimes, and whether through ignorance or stupidity, ignorance, laziness, or maliciousness, laws are being violated across this country and have been broken here in this state. And instances like these do nothing to restore the faith, trust, and confidence we should have in our election system. The foundation of the American system of self-governance is liberty, and a core expression of that liberty is people being able to vote for their representation in honest elections. And those honest, free, and fair elections start with clean and accurate voter rolls. The average registration percentage, the registration rate percentage for any given county in the United States is about 67%. Here in Pennsylvania, there are 8 counties with registration rates at or above 90%. That's virtually impossible. The data leads to an obvious question. Are all the people on the voter rolls in Pennsylvania actually eligible to vote? If you think the answer is yes, then take this into consideration. Our country has now been flooded with tens of millions of people illegally. And in Pennsylvania, you embrace automatic voter registration. Why would you needlessly open yourself up to ineligible voters casting ballots in your elections? In addition, there's currently a case ongoing in the Third Circuit where, by the admission of the government, you have at least 10,000 and as many as 100,000 non-citizens eligible to vote in this state. There is no reason whatsoever you should allow people who are not citizens of America to participate in American elections. Every eligible voter should have the opportunity to cast one ballot, one time, that is only counted once. And any election system that does not pass that simple test is clearly a failure. Success, though, is impossible if the voter rolls are not clean and accurate. I'm going to end with this before I turn it over to Senator Dush. The former Democrat Congressman, many of you know this case well, Ozzie Myers, was convicted of ballot stuffing and conspired with 2 election officials to do so. I want to read you a quote from the prosecutor on the case, a Biden-appointed U.S. attorney named Jacqueline Romero, who said, and I quote, "Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. If even one vote has been illegally cast, or if the integrity of just one election is compromised, it diminishes the faith of the entire process." Folks, we're here today in an obvious effort to protect legal votes and legal voters. As the judge said, one vote cast in error, regardless of the reason, negates someone's legitimate vote. We can't allow that to happen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Dush. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the Center for Election Integrity with the American First Policy Institute for coming alongside of us in our efforts to help clean up the voter rolls in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You know, we have a definition of who can vote. It's called a qualified elector. And those people have to meet certain standards. And if they don't meet those standards, they should not be voting. Unfortunately, in Centre County, which I happen to represent, we have a situation where, as I was going door to door in these housing units that both campus and off campus that had people registered to vote, 1 out of every 10 that I knocked on the door, only 1 out of every 10 was the person actually living in that apartment or in that room. That's a problem. That is a huge problem. And it's something that the former Auditor General, Gene D. Pasquale, outlined in a report that he did in 2019. Interestingly, there was an executive report that was not put out for public consumption. Now, when I tried to get access to that to help determine what the extent of the problem was, so as a legislature we could provide the tools necessary to clean that mess up, I was denied. The Supreme Court came along in Pennsylvania and denied. The State Government Committee and the Intergovernmental Operations Committee absolutely has the authority to review that report. And yet it's been denied to us. The Auditor General, the former Auditor General, came along as part of the lawsuit that was done against us to keep us from having access to that and said, all this stuff's cleared up. Well, if it's cleared up, why don't we have access to it? Why doesn't the public have access to it? You know, there are a group of people out there that have been saying that what we're doing undermines the integrity and undermines the public confidence. Well, when we're not following the law, the people who are not following the law, the people who are standing in the way of transparency to find out what is going on, they are the people who are undermining the confidence and the integrity. I'll give you one example. It's election related, but not directly related to this. Centre County just certified the results of their primary election with 95 people having voted where the signature verification and date was a problem. Things that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals have said, you can't count those ballots. And yet they went ahead and did it. There's no accountability for these folks. I think their solicitor deserves to be held accountable. She gave them advice to violate the law, saying that the law was in flux. The law is static. It is not in flux. What the law is, you have to be able to rely on it. And if, just like with this report and the things that have been found out with Allegheny County having to clear up a bunch of their voter lists, and the Public Interest Legal Foundation's lawsuit where they actually had forced the Secretary of State to clean up some of those things, why should they have to force it? This needs to happen now, and it cannot wait. I'm grateful for the partnership, and we're working on a couple of pieces of legislation in order to help with the process, and I'm grateful for Representative Keefer for her work over in the House. And it is, like I said, it is fantastic to have a partner like the AFPI standing alongside us and providing us the additional resources that will help us in the legislative process in order to clear this up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And while I agree we do need some legislation, there's a lot of things that can be done already. We hear from the media and both the state and federal administrations, they parrot one another about the critical need to protect and advocate for voter registration. It's one of the most sacred rights of a citizen. So then why are all of them so eerily silent on the rights of existing voters? With confounding and clear evidence presented by groups on both sides of the political spectrum that voter rolls across the nation are grossly inflated with ineligible, deceased, duplicate, and absent voter records, they turn a blind eye. Mum's the word. For every ineligible person registered vote, the rights of a lawfully registered voter is at best diluted, but at worst, completely destroyed. And despite the previously declared critical need to protect the sacred right to vote, the state and federal administration and their media allies not only remain silent, but they provide excuses as to why it's okay to disenfranchise existing voters. In 2019, as my colleague mentioned prior, the Auditor General of Pennsylvania, then Democrat D. Pasquale, he conducted an audit of the SURE system. He found tens of thousands of invalid, inaccurate voter records, including deceased, duplicate, and invalid voters. And those were only the records that they were able to identify with all of the redacted information, as the Department of State was wholly uncooperative during his audit. And despite the recommendation of the Auditor General then, just one of his recommendations, that the Department of State issue clear guidance on voter registration protocols to reduce the inaccuracies and help purge the ineligible vote and invalid records, the Department of State to date has issued no such guidance. It's been 5 years and there is no voter registration guidance. And so to compound the existing issue, this Governor Shapiro, usurped our legislative authority and established automatic voter registration, basically by a letter, for anyone that's applying or renewing a driver's license. With numerous unsuccessful legislative attempts to do the same thing in the past for automatic voter registration, Shapiro simply assumed jurisdiction, upended our separation of powers, and ran roughshod over our constitutional rights as legislators. Shapiro empowered the same agency that was primarily responsible for the registration of hundreds of thousands of non-citizen voters identified in 2017. In fact, it was Secretary Al Schmidt, then City of Philadelphia Commissioner, that detailed how the Department of State and PennDOT study of non-citizen driver's license holders matched records belonging to roughly 100,000 current voters in a statewide registration database. That spurred the lawsuit that we are currently in for their violation of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. This is a good government issue, a voter integrity issue. This is a democracy issue. We don't get to pick and choose which laws and what part of the Constitution we want to abide by. We want a fair and just election. Voters must trust our system, and if they're going to trust our system, that begins with the integrity of our voter rolls. We need to clean up our voter rolls now. This is something our counties can do. It does not require legislation. We need to protect the sacred rights of our voters. The voter disenfranchisement must end today. We need to get to work on this, and we need to get to work on this now. And I truly am grateful for our partners at AFPI and the Law Center to help us do some of this research that we can't possibly do independently as legislators. So with that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you both again very much. And one thing I want to make clear to the folks in the crowd, members of the media especially, understand what we're doing here today is to draw attention to an issue we see as a big problem, not just here, but in several states. So we will be, at the conclusion of this press conference, delivering a packet to the governor, to the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, Senate President Pro Tem, and the Speaker of the House. And inside that packet, they will have a sample letter from a concerned citizen, a letter on best practices on how to maintain voter roll integrity, and a data sheet showing how virtually impossible rates of voter registration exist in 8 of your counties in this state. So with that, we'll close here and open up for questions if there are any. We'll be giving you a packet of those, but I'll tell you who they are right now. Allegheny, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Lee, Montgomery, Philadelphia. Do you want to go first? What do you make of the high registration rates?
High registration rates, you just take a look at the voter rolls to make sure that they are removing individuals when they move, which has been a constant battle. Also, deceased voters, we know that they're grossly inflated there. Just match it up with their population, what their population is, what their registration is. This is just, we have systems that they can cross-reference. They're members of ERIC, which is supposed to be cross-referencing this as well. It gives them a report. Now, they can't take those records from ERIC and carte blanche, remove it based on it, but that identifies the records that are the issue, whether they're deceased, whether they have moved, a change of address, whatever it may be, and take action on it. But we don't have any evidence that they've taken action on those. And so possibly it's that.
Well, and I'd like to add one thing. When you've got 90% in a county where there's more than 10% of the people who are under the age of 18, just on its face, that's an issue.
Go ahead.
So they can take action on it. They just can't say, okay, Eric said all these are moved, let's just remove them from the voter rolls, right? They just have to go through those records independently, and they absolutely can take action on them. Same thing with deceased, so they can check with the Department of Health and our vital records, right? They can establish those, that person is in fact deceased based on the information. It does a large part of the work for them. So they can take action on them. They just can't unilaterally just say, okay, we're just taking Eric's word and removing him from there. They also have the ability to do all of the same thing without Eric. They can do it right now. They have the change of address, national change of address records they can do. They have access to vital records. The counties run the elections. They can work with their inter-county agencies to maintain clean voter rolls. And frankly, that's what the law requires. Right, they couldn't just, so they just would have to verify it.
Right.
That's it. They can use it, they just have to verify it.
And they have the means to verify.
Yeah. The answer to that is yes. A lot of similarities in these states. The question was, are there similarities between the counties in Pennsylvania with registration rates that are exceeding the national average versus other states? There are many states that have significant problems as well. In the state of Michigan, for example, half of their counties have registration rates over 100%. So yes, there are similarities in transients. There are dead people that have been on the rolls now for years in a lot of these states too, that haven't been taken off. And so it's tedious, but simple work to do. To cross-check these things with different databases to get it figured out is not a difficult thing to do. It varies, but there are a lot of high population counties and a lot of counties with universities, for example, too. Yes, sir.
Well, you don't know if those people are voting or not. You're making an assumption that they're not voting, but we don't know that. The counties are not reconciling, so they can't tell you what voters voted in the election. They can't. We have very few counties. 47 counties didn't did not reconcile at the end of 2020. We had it again in 22. They're not reconciling the numbers of the voters. They can't tell you actually who voted in that election. So you don't know if those, unless you're going through all those records to see if those invalid records are actually in fact voting. We don't know. Yes, it's supposed to be checked against it to verify that that voter, but some of those, which we had found before, right, the counties are collectively in batches, verify.
Yeah. And there have been instances where people, it's actually been proven in some cases, there have been court cases that have been settled where somebody ostensibly had voted who is deceased. And there are records of that, and so it does happen, and we know that it happens, which gives more impetus for the reason why we have to apply the resources to allow the counties to help clear up those voter rolls. I'm willing to come alongside the counties as partner with whatever they need in terms of personnel or resources to absolutely get out there and clean those up. I mean, I'm knocking on doors and I'm finding what I'm finding, and I have to go back now and check and see if those people actually voted. So that's an issue.
I'll also add, you don't wait to lock your door until someone breaks into your house. You want these preventative measures out in front. And by the way, I'm not saying everyone's going around and finding these votes and using them in some fraudulent, malicious manner. But there are clearly problems, and to pretend as though state record keeping is somehow flawless and these government systems move so beautifully is insane. They can't do it in just about any other aspect of our lives. I don't know why you would give them a pass on something like casting a vote in an election. And look, I don't want to get into a whole Penn State, Ohio State thing here, but let's be clear. Frank LaRose went in and cleaned off non-citizens on his roles in Ohio pretty quickly in short order as that Secretary of State, saw the problem and said, why would you leave it open for fraud? Right. And it's not the amount of votes that could shift or change an election. One fraudulent vote in the United States of America is one too many. And if you're okay with one, how many do we have to have that are cast illegally for you to take action? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? We know the last election in 2020 for president was decided across 3 states with 42,000 votes. That's infinitesimal. Those are small numbers. I'm not saying it would have changed the outcome. What I am saying is to leave the door open by having an exorbitant amount of people on your rolls that shouldn't be there is a problem.
I want to add one more thing. You know, a lot of focus is done on the national elections or the statewide elections, but I have to tell you, every election matters. Yes. Our school boards, what we showed in Lehigh County 2 years ago with the drop boxes, for instance, there were 20 races that were in the margin of error for the extra ballots. So across the board, all of these election matters, they mean something for every single election, whether it's a school board. We had 2 district justices, a common pleas court judge, all within the margins of error. It's a different issue, but all of these election matters matter for the sake of our republic. Yes.
So opposed to it on the front end is A, because of the way it was done, right? So the Constitution clearly says what time, place, and manner is the legislative responsibility. It's number one. Number two, the same agency, we don't have confidence that they have the mechanisms in place to make sure that they have every eligible voter is the one that's actually getting registered to vote. And that's what this lawsuit is about that we have now, right? They won't even show us all of the records of who is and isn't registered. All of the non-citizens, over 100,000 were identified that was done by or facilitated by PennDOT. So We know that, again, the SURE system, they had a contract out for a new SURE system that was supposed to help a lot of this, a lot of that administrative caseload that the counties are dealing with. And again, we don't have, the SURE system has not been upgraded. We have many issues with that SURE system. The counties, I've been to my county numerous times, and they've identified all the different issues with it. So until they have all those checks and balances in place, and systems of internal controls, there are no systems of internal controls. That is a huge issue. Put that in place. That is any kind of business operation 101, is systems of internal controls, and they don't exist.
You know, I'm on the record several times saying that I'm willing to make Election Day the 2 most expensive days in the Commonwealth, and that includes what goes up to getting these voter rolls clean, providing the resources. But to go to your question about the governor's edict, that is the lawsuit that we're involved with. Secretary Schmidt was making a big case, well, there are more Republicans being voted or registered than Democrats. I don't care about that. What I care about is that we follow the rule of law, and the executive usurping the authority of the legislative branch is an issue. And it's an issue that we cannot ignore. The franchise owners of this Commonwealth, the qualified electors, for them to be disenfranchised in the way that they are being disenfranchised, because the covenant that we have, that contract, is called a constitution. And the legislative, the sovereigns of this Commonwealth, the qualified electors, have elected a rules committee. That rules committee sets up the rules for the field of play. When the players and coaches or the referees start changing the rules on the field of play, you've got chaos on the field, the sidelines, in the stands, and more importantly, in the owners' boxes. And all this stuff where we're hearing about people losing confidence, it's because the executive and judicial branches are overstepping their authority. They're writing law when they don't have the authority to write law. There's a difference between power and authority. When you have an ultra vires act, that's coming from using power instead of exercising your authority.